Hi everyone, this is Erwin, aka Mr. Hamilton, coming to you from the Truth About Real Estate Investing show. This week we're doing something different. I am giving to you guys the presentation I gave about 4 weeks ago, my October economic update that I gave to the Halton REI group, our group of network investors that we network with in the Oakville area. So I have posted this presentation on YouTube, as well as however you're listening to this as a traditional podcast. I do recommend having a look at the video version because I am showing my slides that I presented as well. But I'll do my best with the audio as well. So hang tight. So economic update. I titled this presentation "Haves and Have-Nots." There is no middle. Is this the end of the middle class? If you look at a data sample of the Toronto real estate market between 1989 and 2016, the price average has increased a compounding 6.17% per year. And understand that this number is a bit understated. Back in 1989, there were condos being built, but not that many compared to the number of houses. And as time has progressed, there has been more housing starts in the apartment style multifamily condominium versus detached homes. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. But my point being is that the number is if you're like me and you buy detached homes on land, then you know that the price has been going up higher than the 6.17% per year, versus condos have been not nearly as high as that on average since 1989. The median income increase has been about 2.66%. So compare that, just over 6% per year versus for the real estate prices, but incomes have only increased 2.66% per year. The data sample I used was I was using StatsCan, and the data sample I used was just 2011 to 2015 Ontario household average medium income. So Ontario specific because we all live in, most of the analysis I do is in Ontario, since we live in Ontario and I invest in Ontario. And also understand this most households now, I believe, are double income. So we'll never see a boost in income to the levels of current today unless third incomes become more popular with barnacle children. For those who don't know barnacle, it's when the child leaves home, goes to university, and then they move back in and they get a job. And so we may see household incomes increase as it becomes more prevalent, and it is becoming more prevalent, where children are returning to the home and staying in the home. And for this analysis, I believe we're being pretty conservative. So these numbers reality may be a little bit higher than my conservative estimates. I'm showing now a graph from the Toronto Real Estate Board. This is the GTA average for prices. So definitely you want to have a look at this. And again, I took my data sample for average yearly growth from the peak of the 1987-89 housing crash. So if you bought at the absolute peak of the crash, prices still went up over 6% a year, compounding on average. Here's a chart of this is where I got my median incomes from. As you know, on the chart, as I went to Ontario, I averaged the 5 years, 2011 to 2015. And I averaged the growth between those years. Here's an article from 2015 comparing Toronto housing prices from 1985 to 2015. And you see housing prices have gone up about just over 5 times. Notice that the down payment's also gone up roughly 5 times, and same with the mortgage. So 5 times being 419% roughly. Also notice the interest rates have decreased significantly from 13.25% to just under 5%, the posted rate, that is. So average price, I'd use the same chart that I was just showing from that Toronto Star National Post article, and I extrapolated forward to 2017 and to also 2013. 2037. So I forecasted forward 10 years and 20 years using the same growth rates for both average prices in Toronto and the average median price in Ontario. So you can see uh, house price to household income ratio was about 3.14 in 1985. It's more than doubled to 2015, in the year 2015, to just under 8 times price to income ratio. And in 10 years from now, we'll go up to close to 14 times house price to income. And then by 2037, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, we're looking at close to 20 times the average Toronto price to household income. And my conclusion from this is that houses will be reserved for the ultra rich. They'll be reserved for the ultra rich and those who are related to people, typically your parents, who are ultra rich. Because I have no idea how the average Canadian is supposed to afford a $1 million property or $1.5 million property or $2.7 million property as we're forecasting for 2037. Just some basic numbers, right? I'm not saying this is what's going to happen. Being someone from an analytical background, and my mind just likes to run crazy, and I enjoy doing the strip analysis. I'm always interested in like, what if things continue the same? What will the market look like? So again, my assumptions: prices have increased, compounding just over 6%, incomes increasing just under 3%. And the other conclusion I take from this is that we're going to have generations of tenants for life. And that's something I think many of us want for our children, or want for ourselves, or for our grandchildren. So again, these are average prices. So what if you're someone that wants a detached house with a yard? It's interesting. I pulled my group that was sitting in front of me of over 60 people. Like, how many people were raised in an apartment? And no one put their hand up. I have family who currently live in a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. I think it's 800 square feet, and they have a 1-year-old, and they have their challenges managing that space. But based on affordability, you want to live in Toronto, especially you want to live in downtown, in one of like the more desirable areas, like near good transit, near the lake. Often you're left with only condo style living, and that seems to be the future. People will actually raise children in those 2 bedrooms. And then I can't imagine what it will be for like people who don't have as much money as my family members do, who don't make as much as they do. They'll be attempting to raise families inside a 1-bedroom condo, which is, I have kids and my house feels cramped. And my 4-bedroom detached. I have no room for my rower right now. I have an erg machine that I currently store in my garage because there's no room in my house for it. Something also interesting about the job story. This article from the Toronto Sun was stating how, yes, the job numbers are good for Ontario, but if you look deeper into the numbers, roughly half of the job creation numbers are from the public sector, which for you economists know that's not a sustainable model. So the number worked out to an increase of 1.2% in 1 month. And again, that's not something sustainable, when I think a common rule of thumb is that government spending shouldn't increase more than inflation, inflation being somewhere around 2%. So versus the province has increased their spending by 1.2% in 1 month. And don't forget that Ontario is the most indebted sub-sovereign borrower in the world. And then I made a small jab at the fact that the Ontario Liberal government, and then this isn't a political thing, this is a right or wrong thing, in terms from an accounting standpoint, from a greater good standpoint. Our provincial government is hiding the debt refinancing for our hydro prices in order to reduce our prices. They're mortgaging the future basically, and they're hiding those debts under Hydro One, which I believe the article said that will cost us around $4 billion more to the taxpayer. while keeping the Ontario's books cleaner. And that was the trade-off. Cleaner books for the province at an expense of $4 billion to the taxpayer. And so for those who think that a forecast of the Toronto prices going up 6% or more, or for those who think there's going to be a crash, keep in mind Toronto is consistently one of the best places in the world to live. We don't win. We often win. Actually, we pretty much never win like top 3 for anything, for like crime, safety, job creation. But often, we're in the top 10 in almost every category: education, environment, freedom, places to start a business, clean air, environment, all those sorts of things. And then there was one publication that gave Toronto the best city in the world. No idea why. For those who've been to Vancouver, I'm not even sure. And especially if you guys are listening from outside the province, I'm sure many of you do not believe that Toronto is the best city, even in Canada. And having been to Vancouver, Vancouver being a very, very nice city, it is tough to say that Toronto is better than even Vancouver. I don't know why, again, being a bit of a real estate geek, I like seeing all angles, and I do not shy away from the doomsaying headlines in the news about the real estate market. So this one's from the Globe Mail. Pre-sales of new low-rises in Toronto take a steep dive. And then the funny part is the picture that they've used is a condo near Lakeshore in Etobicoke. And if you've been to the area of Etobicoke near the lake, you will see that it is just lined with new construction condominiums. So first of all, are you surprised with the massive supply of pre-sale condos that there would be a reduction in, there would be pressure on reduced demand and less with the increased supply? So digging into the article, builders in the GTA pre-sold just 352 low-rise homes. So that's townhouses and detached and semi-detached homes on the ground in September. And in the same time last year, they sold close to 1,300 low-rise. #doom. But then you dig a little further, you notice the average price is up 21% year over year. But also down slightly from the highs following the spring, from 8.5 in July. So yeah, prices are up 20%. You know, it's basic rule of economics that when the prices rise, there'll be less people that'll buy. So is there really any surprise here? Oh, note that that these points I'm grabbing from the very, very bottom of the article. It's funny because rationality often doesn't make good for good headlines. So market for new condominiums. So this part was taken from the beginning of the article. The market for new condominiums also faced a drop across the GTA in September, with builders selling 1,749 units, down 37% from just over 2,700 units last September. So down 1,000 units. #doom. Yes, the world is over. Then you go to the very bottom of the article, you'll note that prices are up 36% year over year. And fascinatingly, the prices are only slightly down from July. It goes to tell me that condos in Toronto, the prices weren't nearly as heated previously to this most recent correction following the spring market, following the housing fairness plan. So again, would you expect sales to reduce when prices are up 36%? If you're at the grocery store and apples are up 36%, maybe you consider buying less apples, or you might buy some oranges instead. Would that not be common sense? #doom. Here's some resale information from the Real Estate Association of Hamilton Burlington. And what I was trying to show was how prices have changed between the spring of April, April being the month that the Housing Fairness Plan was announced, and comparing it to September. And you'll note the prices are down over 10% on average. Freeholds are actually down close to almost 20%, and condos are down about 8%. Anecdotally, we know that the price range that we invest in for the Hamilton Mountain investment property is down 7 to 10%. Interestingly enough, I have a client selling a property in the West Harbor, so I monitor that market closely. The demand seems to be there. We're seeing somewhere around 3 properties sell a week in our price range, and prices are down maybe 5 to 7% in that area. And what was interesting about this property specifically was it's 200 meters from the James North GO station, the station that opened up just over 2 years ago, next to the gentrifying downtown area of Hamilton. I find this fascinating because investment theory dictates that you purchase near areas of infrastructure improvement and renewal. And the theory worked. We're seeing, even though prices are down, they're down well below the average. Again, we're talking 5 to 7% down from spring prices, compared to the average market is down almost 20%. So what would you rather be? Down 5 to 7 or down close to 20? So invest smart, people. Compared to 5 years ago, prices are still considerably up. Average freehold in Hamilton back in 2012 was just over 320,000 versus in September we were at about an average sales price of 490, almost 500,000. So prices are up almost 180,000 on average over the last 5 years. So those of you who bought 5 years ago, I'm sure you're still quite happy even after this slight correction. Looking at the Toronto real estate market, interestingly enough, it wasn't down nearly as bad. It's always funny thing about stats. I love to look at stats because I don't believe in gut feelings. I believe in having data. A lot of people, probably 90% of people, you ask them which way the market is going, and they'll have a definitive answer and they'll be confident about it. Me, I'll go look it up. Detached prices for single family homes are down 10.8%. Interestingly enough, though, this is between April and September this year. So detached houses are down 10.8%. Condos are up 2%. Again, I find this fascinating because you ask 9 out of 10 people, they'll tell you the market is down. Well, that'll be incorrect if they're referring to the condo market. Niagara Falls, comparing April to September, prices are actually held quite well. Comparing April 2017 to April 2016 to April 2017, we're only down about 20,000. So we're down about 5%. Again, that's fantastic considering the Toronto market is down more than double that number. While we tend to cash flow very well in St. Catharines. So everything's done quite well for our St. Catharines investors, including myself. The CMHC released their housing market outlook for the Greater Toronto Area about 6 weeks ago now. So I'm just going to dig into it a little bit. Market conditions in the GTA are expected to moderate over the next 6 to 9 months before regaining some momentum in the second half. Sales have recently begun to adjust down in response to tighter mortgage qualifying criteria, higher prices, previous weakness in employment, and reduced immigration. prices are expected to experience a very mild downward adjustment into the first part of 2013 as the market conditions become more balanced. That's right, I said 2013. I deliberately went back and after reading this quarter's CMAC forecast, I decided to have a peek back at the one they issued exactly 5 years ago. This is exactly what they wrote 5 years ago. Sounds incredibly just like the one they just wrote. As someone who produces a lot of content, it can't be easier than to just copy paste something you've already done. All you have to do is update the year. But if you have read the 2017 CMHC forecast for the Toronto market, you'll know it reads almost exactly the same. Here's a graph of, again, from 5 years ago. They predicted a rather flat market for the year of 2013, the end of 2012, and for 2013. And for those of you who don't know, they were actually quite wrong. The market was up over 5%. So, CMAC predicted 0. Reality was actual is over 5%. That's a pretty significant difference. And I sort of mentioned this because I find that their estimates are rather conservative for 2018. I don't believe they've factored in enough, which is funny because they have all these numbers. They have household creation numbers. They have our immigration numbers. They seem to be much more bullish. I don't know if bullish is the term. They seem to believe that there'll be more increases in interest rates than I think there will be. And comparing our track records for the last 5 years, I've been more right than they have in terms of interest rate, where interest rates have gone. So anyways, you make your own call on interest rates and immigration and employment numbers, and then you decide for yourself. So again, here's the same graph that I showed earlier. Average Toronto prices. You can see 2013 that it actually went up versus flat as the CMAC predicted. So here is the actual forecast for the end of 2017 going forward. You see they predict slight upward movement in terms of prices, with a lot of wiggle room for things that may happen. But their most likely scenario is slight up. Here's another interesting graph. You see the difference between required income and actual income for down payment. To carry a home in Toronto. You can see it's getting less and less affordable. Dion Begg, a friend of mine who's a mortgage agent, he stated it quite succinctly when he told me when a first-time home buyer comes to him and tells him they need a mortgage, his next question is, are you receiving a down payment gift from your parents? Because based on this graph, there's no feasible way for people to afford houses without assistance. Toronto CMA vacancy rate. Since most of us are landlords, this is important to us. You see that we're trending, the forecast is around 1% vacancy. Around 1 and just above 1%. So almost nothing. Hamilton CMA rental apartment vacancy. They're predicting it to decline. Again, good news for us landlords. And then here's a bit of a breakdown. There was something I was particularly interested in this slide. Oh, yeah. The bottom line, you can see how employment numbers are ticking up and population numbers are increasing as well. I'm generally not that interested in new starts numbers because I don't buy new construction. And also you can see the rental market vacancy rates. They've given the actual numbers from the forecast of 3.8 declining to 3.1 in 2019. So very small vacancy rate. Good news for Hamilton investors. Hamilton set a new personal best in achieving $1 billion in building permits. What the personal best in this case was that they did it sooner than they ever have before. For at least 4 times in the past 5 years, I believe, they've hit $1 billion in permits. But again, this is the fastest that they've ever done it. And there's a note. It's actually the 6th time they've done it. Oh, and also if you dig into it, there was a 200% increase in the value of industrial construction, which is the right direction. If you're in the business of attracting business, you'd rather develop more industrial, more commercial permits versus residential. Residential doesn't generate as nearly the amount of economic benefit as businesses do. So the real estate cycle, unfortunately, the image that I grabbed already had check marks on it. I don't mean to mislead or to tell anyone what I think, but rather look at what makes up a real estate cycle: GDP, job growth, population growth, increased rental demand, decreased vacancies, increased rents, property purchase demand. Figure out how you are doing in your market. Figure out how your market is doing in terms of the real estate market. All of these are real estate indicators to tell you where prices are going. So you have a look for your market. Do you have GDP growth? Do you have population growth? Are your vacancies declining? Is there increased rental demand? All those things. Is that happening in your market? If it is, it's probably a good place to invest. And I think we're coming near the end of our presentation. Economy surges. The Canadian economy surged 4.5% on consumer spending. This is Canada. So we beat the forecast. And interesting, if you dig into it, likely consumer spending, where the money came from, probably wasn't from incomes. It's probably from real estate. People are probably taking out home equity lines and spending that money. Canada adds jobs for the 10th straight month. We are the envy of the G7 from the Calgary Sun. Okay. And this is inflation. This is inflation for the U.S. And I share this because I think you've all heard the term, if the U.S. sneezes, Canada catches a cold. And in general, our monetary policy follows the U.S. in terms of setting interest rates. So aside from Trump, if you follow U.S. politics and you follow U.S. monetary policy, they will same policy that we have basically. They will increase interest rates if their inflation gets too high. Most of the G7, I believe, target around 2% as a target inflation rate. So looking at the forecast to the right in this graph, you see that they're forecasting around 2% for inflation. And based on low inflation, they don't seem to have wiggle room to actually increase interest rates anytime soon. So can you see why I think interest rates will continue to stay low versus the CMHC seems to think that we're going to have several increases in the near future. And I'll leave you with this. Don't let this be you. An article from the Globe and Mail. The new retirement age is 70. I've been reading articles about how to retire. And one of the common tips is to continue to work longer. I don't know about you, but I have no interest in working when I'm 70. I will choose to work. And I definitely won't be working a minimum wage job. So again, this is an economic update that I gave to the Halton Real Estate Investing Group. If you're interested in coming out to see this live and to see a much more updated version, again, I'm recording this close to 5 weeks after I originally gave the presentation. Our website is www.haltonrei.ca/signup. And when you go to that webpage, just simply fill out the right side of the form and you will get an invite for the next meeting. And that is all. Thanks, everyone.